Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on social value. We are looking today at responding to social value in a tender. This is part of a webinar series, so we're on session number 2, and it's been developed in partnership with Cheshire West and Chester Council. And so you will see throughout the session that there are references to Cheshire West and Chester as we go. If you haven't joined a Go for Growth webinar before, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of 3 co-founding directors of Go for Growth. And Go for Growth is a social enterprise dedicated to working in the space between public sector procurement, grant funding applications, commissioning, that kind of thing, and the marketplace to help smaller providers especially prepare to and take part in opportunities for growth in the public sector. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So we are in a Zoom webinar today. The session is being recorded, and a copy of that recording and the slide deck will come out to you probably on Thursday this week. So usually within 48 hours, so probably around Thursday latest. Please do feel free to make notes or you can rely on everything coming out to you that you see today. The chat functionality and Q&A functionality are both enabled. Oh, excuse me. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and say hello on the chat, please do feel free. Equally, if you've got any questions, I've carved out some time at the end, but if you've got any questions or anything you'd like to delve deeper into and chat through as we go, please do pop something in either the chat function or the Q&A function, and I'll try and keep an eye on both as we go through. So what I don't know today is how many of you joined me for the first session, which was an exploration of social value, what it is, an introduction to it. So we explored that really important question of what is this thing called social value? If you were at that session, hopefully you left realizing something actually hopefully quite reassuring, that as an organisation, you probably deliver more social value than you might have originally thought. So you don't need to become a different organisation. What we need to do is help you to become better at recognising it, at measuring it, and of course, communicating it in bid applications. And so today we're taking the next step. So the question that we're asking ourselves today is, how do I explain that social value that I'm creating or will create if I win this contract? How do I explain that in a tender? Because the creation of social value and then writing about social value can often be 2 very different skill sets. And many really brilliant and impactful organisations can lose marks in a tender because they don't explain that impact really clearly. Hopefully then, by the end of today's session, we'll have gone through and you'll have an insight into what buyers are actually looking for, but also some of the common pitfalls that suppliers can often make when responding to social value questions. And as I mentioned, although we'll continue using Cheshire West and Chester as an example, everything that we discuss right across all of these sessions will equally apply to many public sector organisations, including local authorities, NHS trusts, housing associations, schools, academies, emergency services, central government, etc. So that broad set of public sector organisations. Before we begin, if you were on session 1, I want to pop a question into your head. So did you go away from that session realising, actually, we do quite a lot of social value already? If you did, keep that in your head for today's session. If you weren't at session 1, just have, as we're going through stuff, just have a think about what social impact you think that your organisation does create already. So what will we cover? Hopefully today's session will be quite practical. We're going to move into thinking about how we actually bid. So we'll explore social value questions, how they appear in tenders, the different ways that buyers assess social value, the difference between telling the story and providing measurable commitments, how to build stronger responses in bids. And I guess one thing that I would encourage you to do throughout today's session is to put yourself in 2 different pairs of shoes. Firstly, as you, as the supplier, how would you answer the question? But then, secondly, think like you're the buyer, the person who is scoring what you've written down. What would convince you as that evaluator if you were reading 20 responses? And we'll come back to that idea several times throughout the session. So, if we start with a simple question, where exactly does social value appear during a procurement? So, one misconception, I guess, in answering that question is that social value always appears as this one question called describe your social value. Actually, it can appear in lots of different ways. So sometimes it might be a scored method statement or a set of questions that have a score against them. Sometimes it's using something called the TOMS, the themes, outcomes, and measures, that kind of schedule. Sometimes it might be through a delivery plan. Sometimes it might be built into KPIs. It might be written directly into the specification, and it might be all of those things. Increasingly, social value isn't something that sits adjacent to the contract. It is part of the contract itself. So, and we are seeing social value being part of that scoring that you get. Those themes, outcomes, and measures, delivery plans, KPIs, evaluation criteria, all of that. If it's embedded in the tender itself, in the contract itself, then it will continue into contract management thereafter. So, and interestingly, one thing, and I probably will say this a few times today, if social value is scored, if there is an evaluation criteria around social value, then it will appear in the specification. And that specification will be telling you what's important to that commissioning organisation in the public sector and why it's important. Because in public procurement, what we're not allowed to do is test something through evaluation questions, through scored questions that we haven't talked about in the specification. Those scored questions are a mechanism for testing how that specification will be delivered. So you can connect the dots. So if social value is a scored section, you can confidently assume that you will be seeing social value embedded in that specification, what it means, what they want, why it's important. One thing that I would always say to suppliers or bidders, in a tender, don't just search the word social value, read the whole specification, because actually it might be talking about the creation of jobs. So the terminology social value might not be there explicitly, but talking about creation of employment, retention of employment, skills development, environmental considerations like waste, that kind of thing. They might be very well embedded in the specification without using the terminology social value. So read the whole of the specification, because the authority will be using that specification to tell you exactly what matters to them throughout the whole of that contract life. And then for them to test that criteria, they will do that through the scored questions. For example, if a specification repeatedly talks about local employment, community well-being, skills, carbon reduction, those are really big clues about what good looks like, about what's important. And whilst the questions might be quite generic, so they might not say to you, how will you create employment locally? Actually, what you can always do in those questions is refer back to the specification about what's important to that particular organisation. And so you might well have seen social value questions in tenders. You might have seen very detailed, specific social value questions versus very general social value questions in tenders. You will see potentially lots of variation in how social value is approached, or it might be that you've not yet seen scored criteria on social value in a tender. But effectively, once we found the questions on social value, the next challenge for us as bidders is understanding what type of answer the buyers want. And one of the biggest, hopefully, one of the biggest learning points today is that there are, in effect, two different parts to a strong social value response. Firstly, the story, the qualitative element. And then, secondly, the evidence, the quantitative part of your narrative. If we have a look at each, so qualitative social value is the story, it's the narrative, it explains what, why, how, who, what difference will it make? What outcomes are we trying to achieve? The quantitative social value is the measurable commitment, the numbers, the targets, the outputs, the evidence. The strongest social value responses include both. One without the other will feel like it's only half the story. And usually that would score less. So tell the story of what social value will look like for this contract and then nail it on with evidence, numbers, quantities, targets, whatever that looks like. Practical examples. So imagine I write, we are committed to supporting young people. That's great. It's a fantastic ambition. But what does it actually mean? Now, if you compare that with, we will provide 4 paid work placements for local young people aged 16 to 24 during the first year of the contract, working in partnership with local employment organisations. Suddenly, the buyer can see exactly what it is that you want to do and exactly how you will measure it. You can tell the story about actually this will be for young people aged 16 to 24, but it will be in the first year of the contract, and there will be 4 of them. And we'll work in partnership with local employment organisations to get there. So you talk about the who, the what, the how, and the how much. And that will hopefully give the buyer more confidence that you can actually deliver support to young people in that area. And the key message, I guess, is the story creates the confidence, the numbers create the credibility, and we need both in our tenders. And we need to deliver on those commitments that we make. So if we compare some examples then, a qualitative commitment might be we'll work closely with community organisations, and that is very useful. But I'd immediately ask which organisations, how often? And if we add a quantitative lens to that, we might say 2 apprenticeships, 50 volunteer hours, 40% local spend, 6 work placements, and wrap that into our story. And now the evaluator has something that they can really score. And if all those things that we've offered, apprenticeships, volunteer hours, local spend, work placements, if they align back to what's in the specification, what the evaluator is able to see is here is a provider that can deliver what we have prioritised, what's important to us. They get it, they see it, they recognise it, and they're showing me not just what, but how and how much. One mistake suppliers, and it's dead easy to make, is thinking, actually, if I just write loads of stuff, I'll score highly. Actually, evaluators are scoring quality and evidence, not just quantity of words. It's not about just the adjectives. So I'd rather read as an evaluator, we'll employ 2 local residents than we're passionate about supporting local communities. This is on our priority list. We've got it in our corporate strategy that the local community is everything to us. And. The employment of 2 local residents is shorter, but way more powerful. It has a narrative and a quantifiable element. We will employ 2 local residents. Passion is lovely, and it being important to us is where this all starts. And we don't want to lose that. Social value isn't a tick box exercise. It is an extension of who we are and what's important to us. But where we score in procurement is by telling the story and backing it up with evidence, metrics, deliverable numbers. So if I said to you, and have a think about this, if not now, outside of this, which would you, as with your evaluator hat on, which would you find easier to score? A heartfelt promise or a measurable commitment? And it feels probably self-explanatory that the measurable commitment will be easier to score because buyers have to justify every mark that they award in a tender. And we have to write that down as evaluators. So if we talk through some examples, core value versus additional social value, probably one of the most important misconceptions that we'll cover today, because it's one of the areas where suppliers can quite easily lose marks. I'll start with a simple question. Imagine Cheshire West and Chester Council awards you a contract to provide domiciliary care. What's the council paying you to do? They're paying you to provide care. The social implications of that domiciliary care are huge, right? But the domiciliary care is the core contract services. They're paying you to support service users. They're paying you through the contract to meet care standards, to safeguard vulnerable people, to turn up on time, to recruit suitable staff. That is the core contract delivery. And here's where it can often become a bit murky when you're seeking to bid. Most, not all, but most social value sections in bids are asking you what more you can do in addition to the social value that you create today that isn't part of your core contract delivery. And if you're a VCS delivering care, health, and well-being of any kind, it can be really easy to get confused by that. Well, everything we do has a massive social impact, and that's absolutely right. But generally speaking, in the social value section, what you'll be being asked about is, in addition to everything that you already do, which might be apprenticeship, employment, volunteer days, waste management, in addition to all of that, what more could you provide if you were successful in winning this contract that isn't linked to the core contract delivery? So providing domiciliary care isn't what you would be describing in the social value section of that tender. So it asks basically about those extra benefits that you can create for local people, communities, the environment, because you are delivering this contract. Think of it as core value is what the contract pays you to do. Social value is the wider benefit that you have created because you have this contract. So let's use a local cafe as an example. If the council buys catering from the cafe, the lunches are the contract. That's the core delivery. However, if the cafe recruits two unemployed local residents as a direct result of winning that catering contract, if it then goes on to source additional ingredients from local suppliers, tracks those food miles, reduces further the food waste by donating surplus food, for example, those things are examples of additional social value as a direct result of winning that contract that are not core delivery catering lunches for the council. So if you think about your organisation, what's your core service? So in Go for Growth, we would go for contracts on consultancy. So what would our social value be that isn't part of that core delivery service? What's the additional value in your business outside of that core goods and services that you provide that would be classed as your additional social value? Have a think about that. And it will obviously potentially it will differ contract to contract because the values will be bigger, they'll be more complex, you know, your opportunities will be different. So it's not necessarily something that you can have 100% written down ready for the next tender that you do. But you can think about where your values are, what's important to you as an organisation, and where you might look to expand social value on the back of delivering a new contract. So we'll go back to the support to live at home contract because I think it's a really useful way of understanding the distinction. Let's imagine that you are a care provider. You've won a contract for providing care services. The core contract requires you to deliver care safely, support service users, meet CQC requirements, employ trained carers. They're all expected. That's why you've won the contract. Now, additional opportunities that might be created through winning that contract could be that you recruit local people who have never worked in care before. So you're adding to the care workforce. Perhaps you would work with the local job centre to do that. Perhaps you might offer paid work placements linked specifically to that additional contract. Perhaps you might explore providing dementia awareness sessions for unpaid carers in the community as a way of upskilling the local community. You might support staff to gain further qualifications. Those activities go beyond the specification, they go beyond the core contract delivery. And that's where social value can start from a contractual perspective. From a procurement insight perspective, evaluators might often ask themselves one simple question: would this activity still happen if this contract didn't exist? If the answer is yes, it's probably core delivery. If the answer is no, we're creating this because of the contract, then that's much more likely to meet those acid tests of, is this additional social value that we're creating as a direct result of winning this contract? So the key message here is to try not to, if we can, try not to confuse core contract delivery with creating additional social value through the contract. And that is more often than not the distinction that buyers are increasingly looking for. So that hopefully that illustration of separation of core contract delivery from additional activities shows you how those two things can be useful for bids and tenders. So if we think about what social value looks like, we start talking about how we might write the answer. So one thing I regularly see is suppliers jumping straight into writing. Instead, I'd encourage you to plan the response first. So whenever I review a social value response, I'm subconsciously looking for four things, and I'll pan this out further on the next slide. But I'm looking for, in essence, four things. Firstly, is it relevant? Have they actually answered the question? Secondly, can they deliver it? Is there evidence that they've delivered this before, or are they showing me how they will deliver this going forward? Thirdly, what difference will it make? Will it help us deliver the outcomes that this contract is trying to deliver? And how will they demonstrate it and evidence it? Those four questions should kind of shape every response you write. So you can think about that in four headings, actually. You can think about the commitment. What is it that you are saying you will do? The delivery. How are you saying you will do it? The measurement of that. How will you know when you've succeeded? And what format? So the fourth thing, the evidence. What format will the evidence process, what format will it take? And then if you can answer those four things, you've probably got a fairly strong foundation for a response. And this can give us a really useful structure. So let's build a little bit on it. So we'll start by showing the evaluator that you understand the contract, not just social value in general, but this contract, this specification, this community. And then we'll explain what we'll deliver, how we'll deliver it, who we'll work with to deliver it, when it will happen, how we'll monitor progress, and how we'll report back. Notice that nowhere in here have I suggested writing pages and pages and pages. Good responses aren't necessarily long, and often there will be a word count or a page count constraint anyway, say 2 pages of A4 or 500 words or whatever. Good responses aren't always massively long, but they are clear. So, evaluators really appreciate it when suppliers make life easy. So, if I can see in the answer that commitment, delivery, measurement, evidence, I'm already probably feeling more confident. Remember that evaluators might be reading dozens of submissions, so clarity is a strength. And you might see in social value questions, there's a primary question and then there's sub questions underneath. If there are sub questions, it can often be really useful actually just to break down your answer into those subheadings so that your evaluator can very easily see how you have answered everything in that question. The easier a journey we can take the evaluator on, the better. So, if we think about that structure, so we should be thinking about these things that's on the slide. In the specification, they've told us what's important and why it's important. So that might be local employment, local job retention, it might be supporting young people, it might be reducing poverty, it might be increasing health and well-being, et cetera, et cetera. Your response should be able to show an evaluator that you understand those requirements as related in the specification. Your response should show that commitment that you are saying you'll deliver, how those activities will be delivered, how you will measure it, how you will monitor it, and how you'll report on it. And some of that you might be guided by the actual section in social value itself, because it might say we want a specific kind of report. And so you'll be saying, yes, we can do that kind of report, and here's how we would do it, etc., etc. So let's have a think of an example response structure. So firstly, the commitment, be specific, not we'll support employment very generically, but instead we will create or recruit 2 local residents during the first 12 months. So commitment, we will create employment opportunities for local residents, how many of them and by when. So that's much more detailed than we'll just support employment locally. Secondly, the delivery. How? Who will you work with? We will partner with local employment organisations such as Job Centre Plus, community organisations, local college, whoever that might be. But you're saying we have thought not just about what we'll deliver, but how we'll deliver it. We have mechanisms in place ready to go, and we're telling you that story. So we're giving you confidence that we don't just know what, we know how. And then the measurement. How will we know if we've actually done it? How will you record that recruitment? How will you track those outcomes? So we will track the number of local people employed through our balanced scorecard. And so you can upload a copy of that scorecard that then shows the evaluator. They know what, they know how, and they will be able to evidence the achievement of that social value commitment. What else would strengthen it? So you might suggest timescales, so the by when bit, numbers, named partners, reporting, celebrate those answers. They are helping you think like an evaluator. What would you want to know if someone was making the commitment to you? You'd want to know what, you'd want to know how, you'd want to know when, and you'd want to know how much. That kind of thing. So if we start to wrap up the session a little bit, thinking about some of the mistakes that are just dead easy to make. We see them all the time, but hopefully in chatting them through, it will help us to avoid them going forward. The first is being vague. We do require in social value and in our quality question answers as well, we require a level of specificity. So we are committed to supporting the community is lovely, but it is vague because it doesn't say how, it doesn't say what that actually means. How, what are you actually going to do? And how will you know that it actually did support the community? And is supporting the community important to whoever you're bidding for? You will be cross-matching back to the specification. Generic responses can be useful, but if I can copy and paste your answer into another tender, it probably isn't tailored enough. So you might start with something generic and then build out to make sure that it answers the specifics of this particular opportunity. Thirdly, over-promising. We don't want to make unrealistic commitments. We don't want to promise 10 apprentices unless we can deliver 10 apprenticeships. We should only make commitments to what we can deliver, and then we can deliver 100% on those things. So we want to under-promise and over-deliver, never the other way around. Evaluators don't want a fantasy. They want credibility. They want to be able to see that whoever this bidder is, they can deliver what they've said they can deliver, and those deliverables make sense to the contract. And that brings me to the fourth thing around not explaining delivery. Tell the evaluator how you'll make it happen. That's really important, that evidentiary process. I've done this before, here's how we do it, or here's how we will do it going forward in this contract. Either is great, and it evidences to the evaluator that you have mechanisms in place to be able to deliver on those commitments. And then finally, especially if the themes, outcomes, and measures, the TOMs, are in use, double counting can often be a risk. You can't claim your social value elements twice. So, it might be that apprenticeships are captured in one place and other employment is captured in a different place. Make sure that you haven't double counted those same apprentices in different places. So make sure that you're not claiming activities twice. It is something, that evaluators will probably spot, but it also will unravel at contract management stage when you will be obliged contractually to deliver on the commitments that you have talked about as part of winning that contract. The strongest social value responses are usually the most believable because they're rooted in really good evidence. They might not necessarily be the biggest. When you're using the TOMs, the themes, outcomes, and measures, there are all sorts of mechanisms in place to make sure that it's proportionate. So it isn't necessarily about always biggest is best, but actually it is about, can you deliver measurable outcomes that have created real social impact? And so some key takeaways from the session. Social value responses should be relevant to the contract. They should be clear and specific. They should use both the story and the measurable commitments. So the numbers, so the what, the who, the when, the why, the how, and the how much. So all of those things, the story and the measurable commitments. Focus likely, and it will be very clear whether they're looking for additional social value, but it's likely there will be a focus on additional benefits beyond what you already deliver in terms of social value and beyond what the core goods and services are for that contract. And then thinking about measuring impact, evidencing what you will do and how you will evidence it, how you will demonstrate that you have met those commitments. And those KPIs might be already set for you. So it might be a case of showing how you will report on those KPIs, or it might be showing how you will measure your own delivery. And if you can remember, I guess, one thing from today, it's that social value responses don't just describe good intentions. They describe realistic commitments that can be delivered, measured, and evidenced. Now, we know, especially for smaller businesses, that this can often feel like a real minefield, and it can feel a very lonely place. So we are here to help. Go for Growth. All of the support that we offer to the marketplace is offered free of charge at point of use. That's with the exception of bid writing and bid reviewing, which for any organisation do have a separate cost associated. But if you want any help with your social value understanding, if you want anything further, there are lots of ways that we can help. So you can get in touch with us via email. So typically our support email address is the one that you would go to first. You can book a one-to-one via Teams with us using our bookable calendar. And we've got lots of other events. So we've got a social value event for public sector providers coming up this month. And we've got two more events in this social value series for Cheshire West and Chester as well. We also have a self-paced online course that you can take, which is free of charge. And once you complete it, you can request a certificate of completion for it. You can check us out both on Facebook and LinkedIn. We are often posting, hopefully, really helpful bits of information in there as well. So please feel free to use any or all of those options to get more help if you need it. That was it from me. So we are just a little bit ahead of time. So I'm just going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions in the chat. Oh, I feel very close now. There isn't anything so far in the Q&A or the chat functionality. So let me just double check Q&A. No, I've got nothing in there either. So what I would say is hopefully that's been a useful run through of how to present social value in tenders. Of course, it will depend on what that particular contract is looking for, what's important to that commissioning organisation in the public sector. But hopefully today has been useful. Thank you for taking your time out of what I know will be really busy calendars. And if we can be of any more help, please do get in touch with Go for Growth. That is why we're here. So please do get in touch. If you would like to join us for any of the next sessions, please feel free. You can access them through our Eventbrite or through our website also. Thank you ever so much. I won't take up any more of your time. I know everyone is busy. Please do shout if we can be of any more help, and hopefully we'll see you sometime again in the future. Thank you ever so much. Thanks all.